Cornell Soil Health Tests. And we've been spending a lot of time going through those and trying to figure out what it all means. And one of the things that we keep talking about are, and you'll see a lot of out here today, like all these different metrics that are used to measure the health of the soil, right? They're indicators of healthiness. So maybe an indicator of healthiness for us is how many times somebody can run around this area before they have to stop. So do we want to demonstrate that varying healthiness? I mean, I think it would help warm people up.
Yeah. Nicole, you want to give us
Nicole, I saw Nicole was really into it. But anyway, so there's so many indicators, and when you get those tests back, it's, they don't always, doesn't feel like they always make sense, And I don't know, how many hours, you guys, have we spent, and I say we, show up once in a while, but when I do, I'm like, oh yeah, why is that like that? So this wasn't what I was going to talk about, but I'm going to just say it now, is that those tests, they're kind of like a soil, it's like taking a soil test, but even more complex. But I think what people really have to remember is that you have to actually know something about the farm and the management and the context. We talked about bringing things, into context a lot, because just looking at some of these, it'll say it's super healthy. But then when you go out there, you're looking at it and you're going, that's healthy? So you have to really dig into these indices and metrics. And you can't just look at that piece of paper. Soil health, as we talked about a lot, and that was the point of the exercise, was to go out and make observations. Understand what's going on. The point of having Jake, remember Jake? Talk to you a little bit was to add more context, more information, to help inform your observations and what you were seeing and maybe why. Okay, and then taking some of these tests, and even if we had them, we could start like connecting the dots sometimes. And I think that's really hard, especially for beginners, but maybe even harder for the old farts. Willie, I was going to say myself, but you're sitting right there. Sorry.
That's me, but
yeah, okay. But for those of us that think we've seen it all, we can figure it out, it becomes really difficult when things don't start to add up. So the beauty of having a group like this is to be able to work with each other, bounce things off with each other, and just sitting, all of us, I don't know, sometimes there's 4, 5, 6 people all looking at the same thing. Some of the people had been to the farm, some of the people hadn't. There were like little nuances and details that were really critical to actually understanding why those soils were looking the way they were on that test, okay? So what we have to remember is, it doesn't always make sense. There's not always an easy answer. And just, for everybody else to know that soil health isn't always the answer either to what's happening maybe negatively on that farm, okay? And we had a lot of conversations about this where there wasn't really anything about the health of the soil that we could see or we had observed that was limiting the crop production on that farm. That there had to be something else. And sometimes that something else has to do with the landscape, right? And so we observed some of that out here, thanks to Phil, getting us out of our comfort zone, making us walk out into the boondocks, just understanding, like, sometimes the soils are just really wet. And even with the healthiest conditions, they're still going to be challenged. you know, compared to something that we saw, I don't even know what direction that was, but there where the vegetables are being grown, right? You dig that up, it's like a brick. But I bet it grows damn good vegetables every year. Not very healthy, sorry. So there's a lot to unpack. Okay, so you're gonna learn some things here. But we need each other to help, you know, continue to understand how to really take all these tools, our observations, and help farms, you know, achieve better soil health, but also realizing it's not the only thing that we need to be observing and looking at. All right, so that was not at all what I was supposed to talk about. Now, we'll talk about what I was going to talk about, which is organic matter. So here's a bunch of organic matters. Actually, we're all organic matter, right? More or less.
Yeah, well, somebody's organic matter.
Yeah, right?
Well, mostly water.
Okay. And the reason I wanted to talk about this is because the metrics that we're looking at are really often influenced by the types of organic matter that were added to the soil or that are growing on the soil, okay? And they're all really different. So I'm going to start with things that we could add and what the properties of those are on a very basic level. I didn't do any analysis or anything. And then what they might influence when we're looking at soil health indicators, because it's very, very different, right? So let's start with the first little bit of organic matter. What do you call this? Plant, living, right? Living organic matter. And if everybody read their book, whole thing, start to finish, some of us have probably read it multiple times over our lifetime here. Fred talks about living organic matter. Okay, what are the three types that he classifies organic matter?
Living dead and very dead.
Right? And it's super basic. And believe me, within those categories, there's about a bazillion other things that people classify organic matter as. And they all have acronyms, which I know everybody loves here, right? POM, MAMO, I don't know, it's just like a whole bunch of stuff. But if you keep it simple, living, dead, and very dead, it's pretty easy to understand. All right, so this is living organic matter. What else in the soil would be living organic matter?
Bugs.
The what?
Bugs.
Bugs. All kinds of bugs, right? Microbes, bacteria, fungi, protozoa, moles, worms, okay? That's all the living organisms in the soil, including the plants and the plant roots.
The soil food web.
The soil food web.
All those good.
There you go. Yep. All right, so one of the things I want you to notice about this that might help you understand some of the indices is that it's green, right? And green for most of us is sort of like living. It's photosynthesizing, right? Maybe not right this moment, but so it takes carbon, right? And sunlight, or it takes sunlight, photosynthesizes and builds, you know, tiny carbon complexes, as well as all kinds of other nutrients, etc., to grow plant biomass. So when you incorporate this into the soil, what happens to it? It breaks down, decomposes, okay, quickly, slowly, okay? It's,
Sort of
look
quick.
at what I'm showing you.
Quick.
Quick or slow? Quick, okay? All right, so when we're feeding cattle, I know a lot of you here work with livestock producers, you want high energy, high protein, nutrient dense plants, which is exactly what these are, very vegetative, very leafy, to fuel your animals. The more energy, the faster it moves through a cattle. It's no different in the soil, okay? This has lots of energy. The microbes need the energy. It has lots of nutrients. Microbes need the nutrients. It has soluble carbohydrates. Okay, all the things that will break down really quickly, get eaten up very fast by a certain set of microbes. Okay, a lot of bacteria, some protozoas, worms, things like that. Okay, so this will get used up fast. And this is the kind of organic matter that you would incorporate and expect to get broken down relatively quickly. So if this was incorporated in the spring, relatively quickly is 60 to 70 days, right? Okay, so you're not gonna get 120 pounds of nitrogen within the first few weeks of incorporation. Okay, it does still take time, but it goes relatively quickly, right? So the other thing about the living is that it's living and it's breathing. So when you are measuring respiration in the soil as a metric of soil health, what part of the organic matter are you capturing? The living, right? Okay, so we often see respiration relatively high on fields that have cover crops actively growing, or like a perennial forage. So when we take those samples in the spring, we get that analysis back and we see the respiration is higher than if we took those samples from a field that didn't have anything growing on it, okay? That would be probably one of the only differences we might see between a field that has been cover cropped, with like a cornfield with a cover crop, versus a cornfield without one. Everything else could actually look identical. If they've had manure, they were in the same like basic continuous corn, but one has a cover crop and one doesn't. The only thing that you might see that's different is respiration. This is very disappointing, actually, because you, okay? But again, it's showing that there's life and more active living material than in those fields that don't have anything growing. Okay? So respiration is a way to look at that. So the living does a lot of things, and one of the things that it has to do to survive is it needs to eat the dead. This is disgusting. And sometimes the living also eats the living, which is also I don't know what's more disgusting. But the living will eat the living often, but decomposition is the living eating the dead. And it's the newly dead, right? So I don't think this is probably something sanitary, but you can't see it that good. I was out this morning finding this cow patty, and because I wanted to show you dead, recently dead. And a cow patty represents recently dead, okay? And you can see, you can't, it's a start, but we'll pass it around. It's been dead for a little while. There haven't been any cows here for like a month. But you can see that, you can see some of the corn, no, you can't see the corn. You can see some of the plant material in the manure. If you want to pass that around, okay? So we would say that's recently dead. This is recently dead, right? This is what we would like call crop residues. What's really different about this compared to that, besides the fact that it's dead?
It's dry.
It's brown, right? What has it lost? Moisture, carbohydrates, sugar, right? Proteins. Okay, when things die, right, those quickly degradable items go away. Or they're moved in the case of corn, into the kernel, right? Into its babies, essentially, okay? So this would also be recently dead. Now, the thing about the recently dead is that it's still yummy to microbes, but different ones, okay? It's brown, and it's already sort of decomposed, right? It's not green, it's not that stuff. Yeah, so it takes different microbes to break that down, because there's more what? What's left when after you get all the good stuff, the carbohydrates and the sugars?
Well, there's cellulose,
Lignin,
hemicellulose.
hemicellulose, there's often pectins, okay? All right? So there's still some nutrients in there, but there's a lot of carbonaceous material, and that takes a whole different set of microbes to break down, okay? And it takes longer, because it's harder to break it down. So it lasts in the soil for a longer period of time, especially the more lignin, the more cellulose, okay? So that cow manure does have more lignin and cellulose because the cows shit out the stuff that they can't break down in their rumen, correct? Okay, so they're taking all the good stuff out, incorporating it into milk or meat, whatever, and then they shit out the back the stuff that they couldn't break down themselves. And they've got a whole microbiology in their stomach. So then what comes out the back end of the cow has to be broken down by a whole different set of microbes that can actually get something out of that. Now, we know cows or other livestock don't always need everything that's in the plants either, or what they're fed. So oftentimes we get some other goodies out the back, okay? So recently dead gets eaten by the living, and they're breaking it down, and through their process, they're exuding glues, they're wasteful, they're kind of making a mess, which is good for the soil, and it's also releasing extra nutrients that they haven't used for your plants, okay? So what happens to the dead once those microbes get at it? Is it gone after that? Probably some of it. But there's still stuff left, right? That's really, really difficult, actually probably almost impossible for a microbe to break down. And that is the very dead, okay? And that's similar, but not exactly similar, to like compost, right? Compost was some living materials that then became dead, then underwent microbial transformations through the composting process, right? And then all of a sudden it becomes this whole different material that doesn't really smell like decaying material, right? And it's kind of a different color. It's kind of black, right? Okay, so this is what is, it's mostly decomposed. But we can pass this around, but you can immediately see the difference, right, between the cow manure, the living, that this has been decomposed to a whole different level. And people add this to their soil, right? And it's not very, very dead, but it's more dead than cow manure. So what's left here for microbes? Is there still stuff here?
Sure.
Yeah, there's a little bit, right? Different class of microbes can chew on this, get some stuff out of it. Depends how long it's been composted and how actively it's been composted. But it definitely becomes a very different soil amendment, okay? Usually it's like lower in nitrogen, higher in phosphorus, more carbon, it has more charge to it. So it plays a different role in the soils. It really should not, most compost should not be used as the sort of primary fertilizer source, okay? It's more of a soil amendment, a long-term soil building process is really what you should use compost for. And you do get nutrients out of it over time, okay? But it's slower, and it depends on the compost. All right, so when you actually extract organic matter out of the soil, like I said, you can get this thing called the light fraction, which we also call active carbon. And on the Cornell Soil Health Test, that's one of the measurements you get back. So active carbon is sort of an indirect measurement of the of the dead, okay? So it's what's for dinner. It can be actively utilized by the microbes. So it's recently dead. And this is what it looks like. No, that's not it. I can't even see. When you extract it out of the soil. And if you hold some of it up, you can see it still looks like plant material. And it's light colored. And this is active carbon, or the light fraction, okay? It's called the light fraction because it floats.
So it's a density thing.
It is, and there's a lot, like I said, there's as many ways to remove organic matter from the soil and as many names for it as we could sit around and talk about for the rest of the day, okay? So light fraction, you know, you can float it out of the soil basically, or you can use a chemical test like is used on the Cornell Soil Health Test that measures kind of the same fraction of organic. Okay, and then here's very dead. And this came out of different soils as well. And you can see it's black. Okay? And if you looked at it under a microscope, it would just look like dust. Black powder, biochar, you know, it would has that sort of color, texture,
stable carbon.
super stable carbon, okay? Unidentifiable carbon complexes, you know, microbes don't recognize them, but it serves a huge function in the soil. Okay, that's what helps create cation exchange capacity, holds on to water, helps create porosity and aggregates in the soil. So it's super important and critical to the function as well, but it does something different. So compost does something very different than cow manure, than cover crops. But they're all critical, okay, all the types and qualities of organic matter are really critical in building a healthy soil. It's not just one or the other, because when we look at all of our research studies, we see that the cover crops pretty heavily influence respiration. When we add manure into the system, we get more aggregation, right? And then when we add something longer term like compost, we get better water holding capacity, as an example. So, and then when you add in no tillage, you get more on top of that. So sometimes we have to take small steps, you know, when we're doing our work out in the field with farmers. But ultimately, we need to be thinking about how all of these practices build on each other. They're all doing very different things. And that's why we kind of wanted to talk a bit about, you know, what are these different types of organic matter that we have in our lives? What can we do with them, and what do they influence in the soil? And again, it's obviously far more complicated than that, okay? You know, different cover crops have different mycorrhizal associations. They help acidify the soil and release phosphorus. I mean, the opportunities in some ways are endless as you get to know more about all the specifics, right? I mean, it's fascinating to me how you can change the biology of the soil and nutrient cycling just by picking the right crops to grow, okay? And using compost combined with, you know, more soluble sources of nutrients can make a really productive agricultural system over the long term. So again, it's complex, but if you take it back to the living, the dead, and the very dead, and the living, the dead, and then it becomes very dead, right? It's a process and a cycle. And we're trying to encourage that and making sure all the pieces are there and functioning 100% so that we get the overall benefit of it. So, and then with that, I think